Welcome to the Hospitality Talks. My name is Sam-Erik, and here is I get always wrong this word, how I put my arm here. So that's Abid, but my co-host. So really warm welcome, and it's really great to have you joining us. We are live streaming to YouTube, to Facebook, on Hospitality Talks group page, and also LinkedIn Live. So everyone, a warm welcome. Now, if you happen to see the show later on and you couldn't make the live portion, just a big thank you to all the replay viewers. So it's great to have you with us. And today we have a really great show. We have our panel really consists of guests are from a different part of the industry, and whether it's education, whether it's the hotels and hospitality, and also relating to the social media aspect and also the events. So it's really, Abid, you put a great panel together again. So could you introduce us to the panel, and we can get the discussion going?
Fabulous, Sam. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody, no matter which platform that you've joined us. Thank you for being with us again. As Sam said, we have a terrific panel with very diverse background, but they're all connected to hospitality in some shape or form. So we look forward to hearing their views as to how things have evolved over the last decade or so, and how do they see things moving forward. So without any further ado, let me first and foremost bring Rex Warren, who is professor of College of Hospitality Management at my alma mater, Johnson & Wales University. Welcome to Hospitality Talks, Rex.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Well, thank you for joining us, Rex. I hope your day has gone well. We really appreciate you taking the time to join this discussion.
Thanks. The day is off to a great start. I hope it is for everyone else as well.
Well, fantastic. So Rex, if it's okay, let's start out. Can you help us understand how the student experiences have evolved over the past decade or so? Now, you are an industry veteran. You've spent a lot of time in the industry, and now you're in academia. Sort of help us understand how student experiences have evolved over a period of time.
Well, that's a good question. And I get, obviously it's from my perspective, but a couple things have really improved, actually. First is the greater use of educational technology. That technology, the platforms, the tools that faculty can use to deliver have really evolved and improved. Especially in the online environment, which is where I teach almost exclusively now. Those tools have become very robust. It's much easier to engage with the students, keep them interested, much easier to follow their progress, analyze the metrics from the course, use that to then improve the next iteration. So all of that has been exceptionally helpful. The other thing that most institutions in our space are doing are really attempting to maintain very close ties with industry and trying to continually evolve their programs and their curriculums to meet the needs of the industry. So, 10 years ago, there was absolutely no focus on things like revenue management. Today, almost every program out there has a focus, or indeed is putting revenue management forward as one of the strengths of their curriculum. Same is true of things like operations analysis and financial management. So really just trying to keep, industry is our customer at the end of the day. The students and their parents write the checks, but they're the product that we're producing. So our customer is industry, and we want to make sure that they are getting what they need.
Rex, somewhat of a controversial topic, as you know, higher education, generally speaking, but specifically relative to hospitality, there is a huge debate whether the education is worth it, the amount of money that is invested versus what you get in return. And this debate has been had, particularly in US, for a very long time. My fear is that with COVID and with all the digital instructions that are being done, it might push the educational institutions over the edge. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. There have been conversations ongoing in higher ed for quite some time, And higher education has created its own mess, to be candid, in many respects. But, the costs have exploded over time, which changes the value calculus in a lot of people's minds. And in the hospitality or the hotel industry specifically, this has always been an apprenticeship-driven model. People for decades have viewed formal education as sort of secondary to experience. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think both of them are important. But I do see, especially now, with the convergence of a demographic trough, because we apparently stopped making 18-year-olds a while back. So there's a major challenge headed our direction. And also, the various delivery platforms, et cetera, it's ripe for disruption of some type. Now, what that will actually look like, I don't know. But, obviously institutions are working very hard to adapt to that, to change their business models, if you will, and certainly to try to deliver the greatest value they can. COVID, if anything, has accelerated that, I think, because, we're now faced with situations where we're not going to be able to run these institutions at their capacity. Be like the restaurant industry, sort of running at 50% physical capacity in some cases. So it's going to be a really interesting period of time. It'll be interesting to see how it ends up. I think formal education does have a lot of value, obviously, but the value lies in not the things that are most easily visible. I think the value lies in learning how to learn, and then learning how to want to be a lifelong learner. So, my perspective is maybe a little bit different than a traditional academic would be, but it does have value. How we communicate that in the future, be interesting to find out.
Well, look, I'm a firm believer personally of education. I've gone back to school several times. I find it that you can always pick up small things, but it's never going to be that you are handed over a recipe book that you can implement in your work environment. It's
Right.
just not reality. And if that's the expectation you go in with, you might be a bit disappointed. So I hope that students these days, because particularly your targeted audience, the younger generation, I believe is possibly the smartest generation ever, because they have access to information which is unbelievable. They are connected very well. They are tech dependent, and they can have these information at their fingertips, while we were having to go to the libraries, which is, I don't think anybody ever goes to the libraries anymore.
No, libraries are the place to go when you want to be alone, I think.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And Rex, I'll turn it over to Sam here a little bit. Can you help us understand what types of questions are students bringing up? This obviously, hospitality is one of the industries that has been decimated through COVID. Is this still an industry that is attractive to future leaders? What kind of questions are students bringing up?
Well, I think, obviously their first question is, how does this affect me? Is particularly the students that are graduating. They're graduating into, a period that's going to likely to be challenging for them. But I think, in fairness, a lot of them are learning a lot about how rapidly things can change on a global scale, and how rapidly businesses adapt, and with what level of ingenuity. This is a terrible time in the industry, but the ways, what we're seeing as far as a reaction, especially in the hospitality space, is really impressive. And I think if, given what we know now, given the real data that's coming out as opposed to the forecast models, I think this is going to be a very strong V-shaped recovery, hopefully. The hospitality industry is always on both ends of that knife, so I'm fairly confident and very hopeful that this rapid recovery is going to be helpful to them as they, as they view their careers and their opportunities. But the biggest question is always, what about me?
Any particular lessons learned for the students? To be honest, it could be overwhelming and daunting right now when there are hundreds of thousands of people in the industry that have lost their jobs overnight. But any particular lessons learned? I mean, there are, from leadership point of view, from skills, and what do we need to learn today to be more appropriate for the industry?
Well, I think as in any situation, right, there's lessons learned, good lessons and bad lessons. So you see examples of great leadership, you see examples of not great leadership. And, happily in our industry, our leaders by and large are incredibly optimistic. They are extremely focused. They're very adept, and I think students are seeing that. And the biggest lesson I think that they can learn is, when we study strategy and we try to teach them about risks and opportunities, it's a very foreign concept to them usually. It's like, well, how does this event far away going to impact my business here? Well, you're seeing it in real time right now. So it's a fantastic model of why strategic planning is actually important and why you need to think about risks and opportunities. So if anything, it's a very real-time example of that.
I hope that these times will not scare these students, because it is a fabulous industry. Having spent my entire career in the industry, I'm a firm believer, and I think the travel and tourism is going to continue to grow. There is no stopping it as the wealth creation around the world happens. Human beings innately want to travel and experience other cultures, other places. So I hope that does not scare the students. Sam, over to you, please.
Thank you. Actually, we got a comment from Roy Moriyama, and it actually helps me to ask the question from you, Rex. He says, good morning. I'm pleasure to join you here. Currently learning hotel management at Melbourne, Australia via Zoom online. I'll be taking my first job interview as a reservation agent at Osaka next week. So we wish you all the best, Roy, when you're joining this fantastic industry. But Rex, in terms of the way to learn or to study at the university, there is online portion or actually visiting the classes. How is that evolved now through the particularly now after the COVID-19 period, about attending class and learning physically in the class and or in line?
Well, obviously it disrupted everything, and quite rapidly. In every institution of higher education, people were thrown out of the classrooms overnight, literally, and faculty and the universities had to adapt immediately to try to figure out how to deliver these online, course content. And in a lot of cases, they didn't have the tools to do it. So, you saw people jumping onto platforms like Zoom and, trying to do their best. As a practical matter, it's going to depend very much on where you are, I think, and where the location is as far as their progress through the COVID-19, infection rate, et cetera. Most institutions of higher education that I'm aware of are planning for some version of reduced classroom physical capability. So I'll use my university as an example. We would look at for classes that would go live in the fall, we would look at having half of the class in the classroom one day a week, and the other half of the class in the classroom on the other day of the week, and then online delivery for the balance of that. So, if anything goes sideways on us, we're going to have to toss everybody out again and move everything online. But I think we've learned a lot through all of this. Institutions have adapted pretty rapidly, I think, and so the online delivery component is going to be a lot more seamless than it was in the past. As far as whether it's better to be in a classroom or online, it depends upon how you like to learn, really.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean, from here talking from Helsinki, I found that, and when I talked to a number of students, I mean, they like there are the two types. Ones who enjoy learning and studying on their own because there's no disturbances as far as they're concerned. But then there's that social aspect, being able to socialize and being part of a community. So it's I think it's a little bit toss up what people like.
Yeah. And I would tell, especially younger students, undergraduates particularly, procrastination is going to kill you.
Yeah.
If you procrastinate in an online course, you're entering some very treacherous territory.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to do than it is in a live class where you have to be in the seat.
Yeah. It leads me to I'm interested in, because of I remember when I was studying some time ago as a student at UNLV, and we had marketing. And well, the marketing is not the same thing as it is nowadays. And I was wondering, what are you guys teaching the future leaders in terms of marketing? Is it digital transformation, digital marketing, and just to prepare themselves how they can reach their customers better online?
Yeah, a lot of it is obviously focused on digital because that's where marketing happens today. So I think pretty much every program I've seen has evolved to a real focus on digital marketing and using the various technologies and channels to reach their customers, potential and actual. And the beauty of all that, of course, is that you've got tons of data that goes behind that. You put an ad in the newspaper, okay, good luck, grandpa. But with the digital marketing platforms, you pretty much know as much as you need to know about your customers in real time. So it's a vastly more effective way to reach people.
Yeah, I mean, the key really is to collect a lot of data and then you use algorithms and so on. So that's really and I mean, majority of the industry, unfortunately, still is relying on OTAs to get they are not your customers, but they are the customers of OTA, and you're lucky if you can get the email addresses from the guest while they're coming. So I think the key is really to find a way how to entice them to book directly with the hotels and so on.
Yeah, that's been a challenge since the OTAs arrived on the scene, and it's continuing to be a challenge. I think, especially with the Marriott merger, when they all of a sudden inherited all kinds of product, that gave them a really big stick, which they immediately used to go beat on Expedia and others.
Yeah. And
so they got, there's a lot more flexibility into these contractual models now that will help ultimately move share to brand.com. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Not for Expedia necessarily, but it's a good thing.
Yeah, but I still, I enjoy learning what's going on in the different social media platforms, and I'm very interested to see how hotels are still using many hotels are still using in a very traditional way social media. They're posting a nice picture from how it looks like for the sunset, watching from the balcony, maybe the drink of the day, the rose on the bed. But I mean, there's a little more to it using social media these days. And I just wonder how you're addressing the kind of approach the future students who are into marketing, how they should use this digital media to kind of attract customers and also to get to know them better.
Well, obviously, and I don't teach marketing directly, but I do know that our faculty is always focused on whatever is the most, relevant and current. And I think, as has been the case in the past, it's really the ability to create an emotional connection.
Yeah.
That is the most helpful, and to engage effectively. Storytelling, especially, is very helpful, I think. So that it's one of the coolest things about social media as a marketing channel is how incredibly ingenious some of these people are in the way that they engage. I follow a couple of people on social media just specifically for the purpose of seeing how they do it, and they're geniuses. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah. Well, let me get over to Abid for more questions. Thank you very much, Rex.
Rex, any thoughts on how the industry would change after this pandemic is over?
Well, it's a good question. I do think, this industry has always been highly adaptive. I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this, but I do think that, the brands and the management companies, multi-property operators, multi-property owners are all going to learn from this. They're going to harvest best practices on, everything from, shutting down and restarting and moving to virus-free services and more effective contactless technologies. There's going to be a lot of changes that probably come out as a result of this. And I think as always, it's going to be for the betterment of the industry and the guest experience. Ultimately, in the interim, it might be a little dicey, but I think it's going to be fine. I also think there's going to be pretty robust changes that occur across all of contracts. So whether they're contracts with vendors, suppliers, groups, the OTAs, financing arrangements, all of that stuff is going to be evolving because you're going to need a lot different set of flexibility than you have today.
We had a couple of attorneys on our panels in the past, and I think all of a sudden their jobs are going to become far more important or possibly more difficult trying to write the language to address all this. Rex, one last question, and then I'll bring up our next guest. But if you were to write a case study about what the industry has gone through, what we're dealing with today, and the exit from this pandemic, what would that case study look like, and what would be the takeaway?
Well, that's a great question, actually, and I think there's going to be a number of really good case studies that come out of this. I've actually already written one that I delivered in 2 of my courses actually last month, and it was all about how to study demand into a market, which is interesting when hotels are closed, right? How do you actually figure that out? And then what's the restart point? So at what point do owners actually want to reopen their hotels? So it was really a combination of a market demand study and a financial break-even analysis case. But, there's certainly going to be others. Marketing, obviously, and then, operationally, how are you going to change the way you do business? So it's a great, ripe field to be plowed for case studies.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. We can all learn a lot with what we are all dealing with. Rex, please hang in there because we'll be right back to you with other questions and answers. And at this particular point, I'm going to bring Sarah Dandashy, who's the founder of Ask a Concierge. Sarah, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great to have you be part of this. So let's get into it. Can you help us understand how the luxury travel and luxury component of the industry has evolved over a period of time?
Certainly. Well, speaking about luxury travel, prior to COVID-19, I think is kind of important to bring us up to speed. But certainly in the past, 10 years, 15 years, and to give everybody a bit of background, I work in hotels, and so I work in hotels, so I am on, in essence, the front lines of travel in a luxury property in Beverly Hills, so in Los Angeles as well, and then also online. I have an online platform. So what we've seen in luxury travel, it's been this really interesting trend in that it's just a shift from maybe more of some of the traditional experiences, but to really towards authentic and local experiences. And it's been exciting that it's also about maybe, yes, of course we care about thread count. Yes, of course we care about things like this, but it's almost tapping into the efficiency as well too. And so luxury has just evolved. It's how are we using technology now? It's not necessary. Yes, they want the face-to-face interaction, that you typically find in a luxury hotel and property. But more than that is that it is about the efficiency of getting things done. Because in essence, as most guests are, is that they can get a lot of things done on their own. They have Google on their phone, they have these other things, but what can a hotel offer that takes that off their plate and they do it quickly? So, again, it's this push towards, more authentic experiences, and then certainly an efficiency in delivering those experiences.
Sarah, how will this high touch luxury component and personalized service will change with COVID in place?
So it's interesting because we are really in the middle of it, and that's a great question. It's right now we are seeing a little bit of a step back. So a lot of luxury properties are offering different services, and they're really trying to, basically the big question is, how do we remain high touch without touching, in essence? And that's the intersection that we're at. And so you are seeing that many of these luxury properties are continuing to offer traditional services. So even be it as simple as a bellman offering to take a guest's luggage up to their room, that's all part of the offer. And some guests, it'll be basically up to the guest to decide whether they want to do that or if they don't want to do that. But even luxury properties they have less touch points in the actual room. So normally in a room where they might have 6 pillows, they might only have 4, or less towels. You would, as a guest, you would have to call and request for a bathrobe. So they're really different things that we kind of associate with traditional luxury are being altered and changed, and it is really becoming heavily reliant on phone calls and those sort of connections, as well as just being constantly available via apps and communicating with guests that way as well. So high touch without touching.
Sarah, have you seen different demands from different demographics? Boomers were very much into the classic luxury, and we can all define it slightly differently. Do you see that for millennials, do they define luxury differently, and are their expectation any different?
Yes, absolutely. They're very different. They are very different. Even in through this, millennials, what we're seeing is they are wanting to be they want to try the new things. They're a little bit more adventurous. They don't necessarily want the traditional offerings of luxury. Yes, yeah, or maybe I shouldn't say of luxury, but they're more willing to explore new options and offerings, whereas boomers are, they know what they like, and that's why they go and they travel, and they want those continued experiences. Where I think with millennials, or not think, I know it's also about the visual storytelling. How can they relate their experience of while they're traveling to others? Whether it's going on an African safari, which may have seemed very different before, but how they can share that luxurious element of that with their friends and whoever. So there's very much a storytelling component to how millennials like to travel. And so I always say for any sort of hospitality brand, if you can make it, whatever you're offering, interactive, and as they like to say, dare I say, Instagrammable, so that people can document it. I mean, that's honestly what millennials are looking for. They want to be able to share their experiences, whether in real time or just after they travel.
Let me turn it over. I think this will be a great segue. Let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll come right back to you.
Sure.
Well, thank you. You talk about visual storytelling, and of course I know you in Instagram, and you are very active there, and you're doing various you do live stories, you have discussions there. So I'm curious, what are the topics that are being discussed now online on, for instance, in Instagram by your viewers or people who are approaching you, because you have this brand called Ask Concierge. So what are they asking you these days?
What are they asking the concierge for? Good question. Really the big, so my audience is really kind of broken into two different demographics. One are the travelers, and the other are hospitality professionals. And so they're asking different yet similar things. So the one, as far as travelers, they are asking time and time again, when is it safe to travel? I want to go to Greece in November. Can I book now? So really travelers want to know when they can book. And I think that travelers we're seeing they're really taking the time to educate themselves right now, as I also encourage them to, and I think everybody is encouraging them to encourage them to really educate themselves on what properties are offering as far as in terms of cleanliness and new protocols and what they can expect. So, but the overwhelming response from travelers is, how soon can I get back out there? Which, as a hotelier, is exciting, because right now, I mean, the numbers, we know what they are. They are not pretty. And so it is great to hear that there are those people out there, and of various generations that are really excited to get back out there. Now, alternatively, on the flip side, from hoteliers, I am getting a lot of feedback in regards to, what can I do in the meantime? I'm not working right now. How can I stay relevant for when I go back into the workforce? So we're seeing a lot of hoteliers really take a proactive approach to how they can be, in essence, a better employee. And then those that are working are also sharing their story as far as what they're looking at. So we're seeing a cross section, but really, I think just across the board, there is this eagerness to get beyond this in a safe timeline, but to get beyond this so that we can move on.
Yeah. You are active in the Le Clef d'Or, if I'm not mistaken, and of course this is a area of the hospitality which has been always in traditional luxury hotels. Not only in luxury hotels, but also in other hotels. You have the concierge. What is changing in your view the concierge services? Is that there's an extension of an app that complements the actual concierge in the hotel, or how do you see this service is evolving now and maybe in the future?
Another great question. And so traditionally speaking, the concierge role in luxury properties is almost the center or the heartbeat of where the high touch experience happens. The concierge are the ones that have the personal relationships with the guests. They guide them. They are their, local friend or family, and really have the pulse of what's happening in the hotel as well as around the city. So how is that role changing? We're going to see it will change in a lot of ways. In one aspect, it is more vital than ever, because guests will be so reliant on the concierge to know what is open, what's in the area, what can I expect? Are restaurants, what's the restaurant experience like? If they're coming, especially to these luxury properties, there's a certain expectation for experience. And so the concierge, it is absolutely paramount that they should stay and remain educated on that, so that they're able to properly and accurately guide their guests. Now, that being said, and we were seeing this, prior to the pandemic, is the use of technology and the use of apps. So many hotels are incorporating texting services or apps, through the hotel, that the guests are able to communicate with the concierge. As far as being a service provider, using that technology component, it is challenging because there's so many nuances that you'd like to share. And it's kind of hard to share in a shorter text when you want to go into depth of what the experience is, because you want to paint the picture. So it's a little challenging as far as offering that, but it's definitely it's a way that we were communicating before, and absolutely right now with the pandemic, we'll just see an accelerated use of texting and app capabilities.
Yeah. What advice can you give it to the old school general managers who say that it's a bunch of rubbish, that we only rely on face to face? What would you tell them?
I would ask them, how often are they using their own cell phone?
Yeah, exactly.
Most likely they are. And that's what's so interesting. I love that you asked that, because so often I find that people have this disconnect,
Yeah.
especially if you do have of a different generation. Oh, but no, that's not how it is. And it's like, isn't it? How often are you using your phone?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, my grandmother's on Facebook and she's 90. Granted, I'm not going to maybe, text her. That might be a bit of a different thing, but I think these general managers or those individuals that, might be on a higher level, that might be of an old school thought, they might underestimate how much they are using technology themselves, and the answer is right there in front of them.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I usually tell to my fellow hoteliers that mobile device is not the phone anymore. It's not a device. It's a situation. That's where you go for to getting a lot of answers. I have to admit I tend to use the device a lot, because I forget something and I will get there to get answers to what I need. So that's the way things are. Okay, well, thanks very much, Sarah, and over to you, Abid.
Sarah, talk about storytelling, and I can recall the story from my time when I was based in Dallas. A guest of ours, on his way from the airport, had heard a song, and he wanted to find out who the performer was, who the artist was, and all he could tell our concierge was the time approximately that the song played and what radio station it was. And lo and behold, the person on our team was able to find out who the performer was. And mind you, this is long before iTunes and long before any of the apps. Can you tell us some of the stories of unique requests that you might have gotten?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, the stories are countless. And similar to that, it's, we would even have guests come up at times, with the cover of a magazine. I love this dress that Jennifer Aniston is wearing. Can you get this dress for me in a size 2? Thank you. They leave it and they walk off. Like, okay, great. And then you end up, the great thing is, well, the thing about a good concierge is it's not about necessarily knowing the answer in the moment, but it's knowing how to get the answer. And so, then it's, in that particular case, great. One has a, stylist. We have contacts with stylists, and we end up calling them, work with them. We figure out what the dress is. We're able to then locate it and proceed from there. But I mean, I've had a series of kind of crazy requests. One of them, my favorite, we had a guest that had been in town, and he was an avid cyclist, had a really expensive bike, and he was then going out of town and then coming back. So he ended up putting his bike into storage by LAX, the airport. And he put his bike into storage, and then he lost the claim ticket. So he couldn't remember the name of the company, where it was. He just knew it was by LAX. And then he was like, I left it with some guy named Jose. Well, if you know anything about Southern California, there are quite a few Jose's. So I was like, my gosh, how am I going to figure this out? And it's like, okay, well, my first question to him was, and I think this is also key to, great hospitality, is knowing what questions to ask. My question to him was, well, how did you even get the information to find this particular storage place? And he's like, oh, from American Airlines baggage claim. I'm like, okay. So I call American Airlines baggage claim. Luckily, they answer, because getting them on the phone is like getting the United States Postal Service on the phone. It's practically impossible. They miraculously answer. And, I explain, and they say, oh, we recommend people to XYZ company. So I call XYZ company, and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for a bike. Is there a Jose that works there? And they're like, we don't have a bike and we don't have a Jose. But when we're full, we send people here. I'm like, okay, great. Next I go. Next place I call. Jose answers the phone. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're on to something. Jose has answered the phone. I ask him if he has a bike. We're able to put it together. And lo and behold, we find the bike for this guest. So and as you can hear probably in how I'm sharing the story, it is that storytelling. You get excited. You're like, oh my gosh, this is I mean, it's a problem, and it's a challenge, and you're trying to find the solution. And I think that in delivering good hospitality, if you get excited over the challenges, that is how you are able to just deliver hospitality on a higher level and
Well,
get
truly,
feedback.
that's where the stories are created that are then repeated over and over again. As I repeated the story about Dallas, that was a gazillion years ago, and now I've told that story numerous times in my speaking engagement. Sarah, one last question before we bring on our next guest. You've traveled all over the world. Any favorite destinations?
Ooh, yes, I have traveled to many, many places. I have a couple, I'll throw out a couple because it's hard to choose just one, and I don't think it's fair to choose just one. But I have to say, I was thoroughly impressed with Dubai when I was in Dubai a couple years ago. I find that they do take a very progressive approach to everything that they're offering, which is particularly unique, especially to that part of the world. And I, being half Lebanese and I grew up in Saudi Arabia, I'm rather familiar with the Middle East. And so I found that to be particularly exciting. But Buenos Aires is amazing as well, too. And even more recently, I had the chance to be over in Southeast Asia. So I was in Thailand and in Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And I did a quick trip around there. So that was pretty exciting. I mean, to me, it's like all destinations are great destinations. It just is about your mindset and your outlook.
And each one of these destinations are very unique in their own way and culturally rich. So thank you for that. Please stick around. We have lots of other questions and we'll come right back to you. I'm going to bring in our next guest at this point, Jessica Dalka, who's the owner and founder of Chicago Planner Magazine. Welcome to Hospitality Talk, Jessica.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for taking the time. Now, you have been very engaged and involved in event planning, from major corporate events to social events. Tell us how this event planning discipline has changed over a period of time. Obviously, it's a pivotal discipline, but how has it evolved?
So I think actually one of the biggest evolutions of the events industry is the fact that people are recognizing that events is an industry, especially when I talk to people who've been planning 20 or 30 years. It wasn't a job description even, and now we're seeing it in universities. I know that Rex was talking about what that experience is for those in hospitality. So I think that's one of the first things that's really exciting about events. And then, of course, the implementation of technology.
The events obviously are far more involved and far more engaging. For some of the organization, it is the business model. So help us understand, how has that business model evolved, particularly with COVID in place?
So for events, there's a variety of ways you might make money from it, whether it's ticketing or sponsorship. And then, of course, if you are offering a service, then you're getting paid for your services, particularly in regards to social events over corporate events. So as that has evolved, as you said, I think with COVID in mind, people are really trying to figure out how are we proving the value of our services and also being able to charge for them. As everything moves to virtual, a lot of people are offering things for free, whether they're education and webinars or just general meeting and event experiences. And so a discussion that I've had across the board, both here in the United States and internationally, is that process of how do we know that COVID is moving events in a virtual direction. So how do we provide value? How do we prove that there's value in a virtual event? And how do we charge for that?
So what does that look like? How would the events be when we're dealing with COVID? Is it going to be a sort of a hybrid thing? Am I going to have to be standing 6 feet away from you, but dial you on my phone so that we can carry on a conversation? What would that look like?
So I think that we're going to see the rise of some platforms. More people are going to look at being integrated in a hybrid format, as you mentioned. And I think that's going to be really important. And I don't think it should be discounted, because I do think that's the direction that events were headed. And this has actually accelerated that process. So, I think that there are a lot of great opportunities for people to actually zero in on why they are attending an event. So you're not just having someone, my company is paying for me to go to this conference. I'm going to spend X amount of dollars and, stop at some booths and maybe talk to some people. I think that successful event planners, and I'm going to use conferences as an example for this, are going to say, we want you to be a part of our network, right? Like, I think most people know that they're building value through their networks or accessibility, and that's kind of the point of a conference. So when you have that, and then you can say, we still want to introduce you, or we still want to give you the opportunity to speak to those people, because we know that this is a catalyst and a tool for sales and for the foundation of your business and to get in front of people. I think that that's still going to be an option. And in fact, I think it's actually going to increase opportunities for a lot of people who couldn't travel for some reason or had other restrictions, whether they were work or personal, that kept them from attending. And I think it's going to allow for a diversified monetization platform, because maybe somebody only wants to attend one piece of that conference, and normally maybe they wouldn't have paid to attend if they knew they were only interested in one part of that. But now they say, well, maybe I can attend this portion and it's not going to require me to take time off of work and travel to this location. I can pay to be a part of it, still get that benefit to my business. And, I think then the planners are going to have a lot more traction and a lot more data on that as well. So that way, then they can go to their sponsors and people who are involved in paying to be there as well to say, hey, look, we have this segment. This is how we're able to track it. And this is why it's valuable to you.
I think that's a great point. The digital distribution certainly provides us with the wealth of data that might not be available when we were meeting in person. We can almost tailor make these events as opposed to a shotgun approach of trying to be everything to everybody. Let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll be right back to you. Sam.
Thank you, Abid. Jessica, I'm actually quite fascinated about what you were saying about these virtual events, because I've been, like many other people, have been watching all kinds of virtual events, and you cannot expect that when you are ending up paying a fee to join the day or paying portion, that it's like almost like the quality of a TV production. But more of them are like a Zoom events, and the participants are talking from a laptop camera, and maybe the window is in the back and you cannot see them properly. I'm just looking from the point of view when you're organizing these events, that how to prep the people who actually are launching these events, that in order to make a sort of a quality experience. What are sort of the advice you give to them who's getting into this part of the business?
So I think that there's a differential there. So are you talking about, as a planner, are you looking at speakers, and what is your approach to make sure they have what they need? And in that case, I would say, you're definitely going to want to work with an AV company, and even be willing to ship boxes with the right materials, and give as much information and make sure they have prep time. While normally they might come even a day early and do run-throughs, you still have to do a lot of the same processes to ensure that people are presenting and representing brands in the best way. But then for individual contacts and interactions virtually, it's going to depend on the experience, because not everyone's necessarily talking to each other the whole time. Maybe it's more of an interaction. Maybe you have discussion rooms while there's someone speaking. So I think you're going to be looking at the volume of attendees that you have, and you're also going to be paying attention to the types of interactions and what's going to provide the most value. And of course, you can put together suggested setups of, this is what we suggest in terms of your lighting, in terms of the quality of camera, in terms of your sound, and even, potentially suggesting that as something that people get ahead of time. For big conferences, I know here in Chicago, like we have ASCO, which is the oncology convention. It brings 60,000 people typically, not this year, but typically to Chicago, and it's international. So many people, they're planning this a year out. The attendees alone usually expect about a year out. And they're planning this maybe as far as, 6-7 years in terms on the conference side of where it's going to be and all of those details. And so depending on what your sponsorship looks like, you might even want to send out sponsored boxes to some of your attendees or premium attendees and offer additional services as an opportunity to upsell the conference experience.
Very good. I think you answered a question we got from one of our viewers, Amr Abulwafa. So shout out to Amr. He's in Helsinki. He says, what do you think is the best way to adapt to switching to virtual events and platforms, and the difficulty of getting corporate sponsors to get hyped up after all the cuts in marketing budgets? But I think you were partly touching all these subjects already. But anything you'd like to add to that?
I think that when mentioning of the corporate sponsors, we are talking again about that data that wasn't necessarily available. That's very attractive. We know that the billions of dollars, maybe trillions even, that are floating around Silicon Valley are related to the fact that technology equals data. It gives you the ability to hone in. And so when we don't want to lose the human experience, right? Like people do want that social side, they want to interact, but I don't think that it means that it has to only be the way it's been done before.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you very much. Great answer to this. Over to you, Abid.
Jessica, any thoughts on what types of events would be coming back first? Currently, whether it is corporate discussions, whether it is panels, whether it is weddings or funerals, a lot of these things are being done digitally. Any thoughts on what kind of events will come back first?
Yes, definitely social events. And part of that is because social events, whether it's weddings or birthdays or other things that are involved in people's personal lives, people have different feelings about how safe an area is. And certain places, if you're let's say you're in Wyoming, that's going to be a very different social experience than when you're in a metropolitan city like Chicago or New York or DC. So we have to assume that some people are feeling very differently about COVID based on what their environment is like. And so, people are already talking about let's have a cookout, let's have a birthday. And so if you are a caterer or you provide decor, that's exciting, right? That's something that we can say, listen, we can have minimal contact still, we can still provide you services, or we can sell you something specific. But the other side of it is when we're looking at corporate, that's going to be slower because you have more legal issue tied to it. If a company goes forward and says, nope, we're going to do a 1,000-person event, there's liabilities there if people get sick or something happens at that event. And so corporations and business-based events are going to be coming back a little bit slower than social events where people feel like they can vet people. They're going to have more trust because they know each other, and they can say, I was actually talking to my best friend and she said, me and my friends are having that discussion of who are we going to let in our circle as it expands, as we're saying it's okay to go back out. And corporations can't really have that conversation because then you're looking at potentially discrimination and other issues. So social and then corporate would be my answer to that.
Fair enough. Hey, and one last question before we bring all of our guests back in together, because there are several other things that we need to talk about. From your clients, do they like unique venues versus traditional venues? What are some of the attributes that are important to them?
So I think first and foremost, and particularly going forward after COVID, having tech in your venue is going to be the most important. And another thing that I think is indicative of whether or not a venue is perhaps more unique or interesting is who the client is. In Chicago, we have a lot of international clients, and then we also have local and regional clients. So for some people, being in a skyscraper is the most unique thing they've ever seen. Whereas if you live here, and I'm like hop into, the Sears Tower all the time, and I'm like, okay, going up 70 floors could be exciting to you. So there's those kind of aspects that vary based on who your client is. But I think the ability to be adaptable in this new industry as we go forward after COVID is going to be what's appealing, and the ability to perhaps instead of focusing for venues on butts and seats, you're going to have to focus more on technology. What technology services can you provide for hybrid events? What options do you have built in? Because whenever, both when I plan and I talk to other planners, technology gets very expensive. When you have to bring everything in, suddenly the cost of that venue skyrockets. And I have that discussion with a lot of people, especially people who are newer to the industry, because they don't realize that sometimes when a venue costs more but includes everything, it's actually a value add in the long run and can save you money. So those are going to be some really important aspects that every venue should be thinking about, is how can they be perhaps shifting slightly in their technology offerings to be able to accommodate businesses and people who want to incorporate that as part of their safety measures.
Our industry is full of technophobes, I think, and also because it's a thin margin industry, quite candidly, and technology is changing so rapidly, we can't keep up with it. We don't understand it, and if we don't understand it, it scares us. And that's part of the paradigm that we're dealing with. But I think more and more and more, and again, this COVID might have forced the issue of us getting used to technology. It might not be absolutely perfect, but at least people are getting comfortable with it, and that'll help. One last question, and Sam, if it's okay, we'll bring everybody on board. How has it been dealing with different stakeholders in planning these events during this pandemic? This is for you, Jessica. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So I guess when you say stakeholders, are you talking about the end clients, correct?
Well, from clients to the people that work at the venues, and you trying to connect all the dots, and attendees and delegates. There are lots of moving parts, as you know, in planning an event.
Yes. So, I mean, it's depends on exactly what this type of event is, right? Like if you're a wedding planner right now, you're trying to figure out what's most important to your client, which is personal for a lot of couples. That date is essential to their day. So is it something where you just do a Zoom wedding with all of your family and friends? I've seen that. Are you moving the date back? Are you adjusting the event in that way for your end client, versus when you're looking at corporations, which again, there's more liability there if they choose to move forward. Honestly, there's just been a lot of cancellations. The bigger the event, particularly if there is an international aspect to it, most of them have been canceled for this year. So the big question that's been happening is, how can we come back? When can we come back? Which I know Sarah said her traveling clients have asked that as well. But then, in addition to when can we come back, how do we save our sponsors? There's been a lot of discussion on deposits, force majeure when we're looking at contracts. That's a big one. What about event insurance? That's another question. And that's probably going to be going on into 2021 to figure out how people can save and adjust and reset their events. But then when you have big festivals like here in Chicago, we have Lollapalooza that brings in hundreds of thousands of people. That's just canceled for the year. So it's tough to talk about, I think, this year and what that looks like. But I think that it means that we're going to see some excitement in 2021.
Well, if the sporting events are going to be executed without the fans in the bleachers, it's a totally different environment, and no different for what these corporate events or social events would look like. I wonder if Amazon has set up a wedding registry, though I haven't gone and looked at it, but that will be the next thing for Zoom weddings. You can send the presents out to the bride and groom through Amazon. Rex, a question for you, if I may ask. And Jessica talked about different types of markets that are opening up to these events, that people that might not have been able to attend these events physically because of personal issues or time constraints. Have you seen a bigger take up in a remote learning environment?
Yes, and it'll be interesting to see how our enrollment looks for the fall. We're still looking at some advanced numbers, but there does appear to be a fairly significant shift to online. My sense is, I don't know this for a fact, but my sense is that a lot of it's being driven by the parents who are not really quite on board yet with sending, their student into a dormitory, for example. So we'll see. But yeah, we're definitely seeing some shifts that way as well, at least for what appears to be the fall semester.
Well, I think that will continue on, and quite candidly, as a person who likes learning and who has stayed engaged in education, I really do believe that it opens up a whole host of new students, if you would, that might not have been able to travel, whether it's visa requirements or climate issues or financial issues, whatever the case might be. It opens up a whole host of new markets that educational institutions can draw upon.
Yeah.
Sarah, question for you. Telling another story from my days in Phuket, one of the Hollywood type guests that was with us in Phuket, an island where people go there to enjoy the nature and sea, sun, and sand. This person wanted self-tanning cream. There was no self-tanning cream in Phuket, at least at that time. We had to put somebody on a plane to go to a larger city to pick up the cream and bring it back. Any other amazingly different stories that you can tell that made it out on the social media?
That made it on social media, or what do you mean?
Yes.
Oh gosh. Well, actually, you know what? There is an interesting story, and this is not my personal story, but it is a very good friend of mine, and I know that I would feel comfortable telling her story because we've also seen it in different ways. But for example, we've had there was in her case, she had a family staying at her hotel, and the child had a teddy bear. And they end up leaving, and as what happens when you're traveling with a family, stuff gets left behind, always, without a doubt. And so they call a couple days later. Oh, is there, was the teddy bear found? Is it in lost and found? They dig, they find it, and they're like, oh, perfect. Can we get the information to send the teddy bear back? And absolutely, they do it. But in the meantime, what they ended up doing is they basically staged a photo shoot with the teddy bear all around the hotel, in the spa, by the pool, next to room service, doing all this stuff. And then they actually put together a little book of all of these images. So they ended up sending this book back with the teddy bear. And it's like, so sorry for, sorry I got stuck at the hotel, but I was having such a great time. It's so great to be back home. And what a wonderful way to take such a simple thing, which is just really returning an item that was in lost and found, and creating this whole magical experience for the child. But the parents are feeling that as well too.
That's a great story. And I think now I have to ask the viewers, because the viewers are very quiet at the moment. So if you really like the content and all the information you're getting and the value you're getting, can you give us a thumbs up? That's what we call sort of a social currency for everyone. So I appreciate your participation in this broadcast also. So that I'm sure will go very, very well. Thank you.
Rex, back to you. What can the industry do to keep the future leaders, these students that are pursuing this career, keep them engaged, keep them motivated, that they have made the right decision?
That's a great question. People, all of us who are involved in the hospitality industry really have an affinity for it. This is not something that you sort of approach in a half measure. So you already have the aptitude for it. You already have the appreciation for it. And I would say to the leaders of the business units, continue to lead with passion. Engage your teams and engage effectively, and continue to lead as you have in the past, with passion and with a positive attitude. And that's going to be hugely attractive to people. So I think that's probably not a secret, but would go a long way to doing that.
I think, quite candidly, I feel for these new entrants into this profession, because right now all they're seeing is layoffs. All they're seeing is how the industry is negatively impacted. But having spent my entire career in the industry, I'm a big believer in it, that there isn't another career like this. This career has been fantastic for me, starting with the school that you were involved with, the school that I went to. It was a great experience, and from there on, I was able to build on it. So, absolutely great industry to be involved in. Jessica, if I may ask you a question, in a few years ago, and this is going pre-even 9/11 days, we were able to do all kinds of crazy things, like holding banquet functions above on an aircraft carrier, or taking people to some of the absolute most unique experiences that if they were not attending that event, they might not have been part of that. Has that been changed? Do we still have access to these kinds of venues, or do we have to stick to more mainstream these days?
No, I don't think so at all. And I think even to Sarah's point earlier, she talked about how people are trying to have experiences that are visually appealing, and all the things that you mentioned are incredibly visually appealing. And so I think that some things might shift in that, and again, even when the discussion among chefs, I've had this conversation with a lot of restaurants on how they are shifting their food to be more Instagram friendly. So you can take that photo of it and it's drawing people to that restaurant. So in terms of how things might look, or paying more attention to the lighting in your space, those things are changing, but that desire for a unique experience, I think, is only going up. Because, and I'm sure Sarah can second this, is that I think travel actually feels more approachable to younger generations. It's not just something you do maybe once a year or every other year, and it's this big thing. You can travel in different ways, and you can show people that you are interacting. And I think events are really taking that in, whether it is a virtual reality experience, or it's a really unique venue, or dinner in a cave, or whatever it might be. Those are actually become more popular, I think, over the years, and because they feel more accessible, and they're visually in front of people more. And so it makes people actually say, hey, I saw this. I think any planner can say, okay, I get that Pinterest board from my client of all these things they've seen. What can we execute on their budget? So I think you can rest assured we're going to have a lot of fun in the future.
Oh, that's great. Sam was talking about it earlier, that a lot of the hotels still haven't quite understood the power of social media. And Sarah, for you, a lot of the businesses are still trying to make a curated content, if I may use that. So it's almost like an ad more than a natural thing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's proven time and again, and in that, now more than ever, we just have we are a more educated consumer base. So we know if we see a super polished photo, we're like, well, that's pretty, but how real is it? And I really think that as hotels expand their social media presence and play around with that, people want the real thing. They want the real thing, and they understand that it could be glamorized a bit. They don't necessarily want the real thing that you see on something like a TripAdvisor, where it's like all horrible photos. They want to see it in a pretty way, but maybe even through different people's lenses. And I think that that's where hotels can really, obviously depending on the property, but they can really take advantage of working with whether it's local influencers or people like that can help share their experience in a different way and make it more engaging so that it's not just like, oh, this is what we offer and these are all the pretty things, but it's as somebody that's coming and staying there, basically taking away their microphone and giving it to somebody else to let them speak about the experience. And time and again, consumers respond to that. Well,
thank you. And I know we are approaching the end of our time here. Actually, we've gone over. One last question, and maybe I'll throw it out in general, and whoever wants to take the lead. This was a question sent in last night, and it was predominantly focused on sales and marketing team, whether the hotels should be cutting back on sales and marketing efforts or tapering that effort in any way, shape, or form during this pandemic. So let me ask Rex to take the lead, if you don't mind.
Well, it's probably a bad idea. I would suggest to most anyone that, in periods of low demand, which is where we are, that as folks ramp up, marketing, sales specifically, not so much marketing, but sales specifically is going to become increasingly important. So my sense would say no. If you're going to invest, as we begin to power out of this, if you want to grab the market share that's out there, you better be very focused on your sales efforts.
Thank you. And Sarah, this is the customer coming to the hotel. This is the buying portion of the consumer journey. Do you have any thoughts on should the sales be done any differently?
I mean, I don't know necessarily about differently as they are. Again, it's when it comes to sales is that I think maybe the conversation's different, in that you are sharing what they can expect. So again, the sales team will be the liaison to squash any sort of concern that group might have coming in, or even just travelers in general. Is that the sales team needs to be. We need to double down on that, and they need to be informed as far as what the hotel is doing, and to make sure that whoever is interested in coming in the future, in whatever the areas, is that they have all the answers ready to provide them.
Jessica, as intuitive as that might sound, that sales will lead the recovery. Has that been what is being practiced as you deal with the hotels?
So I think that right now, especially planners are looking to negotiate and work as much as they can to save their budgets. I think everybody's trying to save their budgets. And so there needs to be, I think, from a sales side, people understanding that however they can maintain relationships. I think in events, a lot of what we do is actually sales. There's a lot of negotiation there. And so you have to really think of this as the time to organize your list of who you've wanted to talk to if you're a salesperson, especially when we're looking at hotels. Because I myself have found myself having conversations with people who are normally way too busy to talk, and now everyone has a bit of free time. And while that may not immediately result in sales, I think people are paying attention to who's reaching out to them and what those conversations are looking like. So I'd actually written a piece about this for Chicago Planner Magazine about what is networking in COVID and what do we need to be doing. And I think the other thing that is challenging with sales is understanding that everyone's situation right now could be really different. I've talked to everyone from people who've lost jobs to have lost family members from COVID-19. So there is really a need for sensitivity. And I think if you just reach out and say, hey, are you still doing your event? I mean, you have to be sensitive and look at it as an opportunity to build your relationships and know that the sales will come in time.
I think that goes back to, again, knowing the customer, knowing who the audience is, and really tailor making the message for them. Sam, and I know we are really at the tail end of it. Are there any questions, or shall we go into our as we've always ended our show with feel-good stories. Over to you, Sam.
Well, before doing that feel-good story, I think we're getting a lot of feedback, and here was quite an interesting comment regarding Concierge, is that I hope the hotels keep seeing Concierge as a valuable in the involving needs for the guest. We are the experts in the city and how people can safely rediscover it, reinvest in our hotels and communities. So I think this is a concierge, and I think big shout out to all the concierges there, because I think it was hit it home right in the right way. What do you think, Sarah?
Absolutely. I think that comment really echoed what I was sort of talking about earlier, in that, the concierge really are going to be so vital moving forward. And, I think a true concierge is also going to prove their adaptability. Adaptability not only in how they communicate with guests, but adaptability in maybe how their role might evolve. I think a true concierge really, like a good one is, we're not afraid to roll up our sleeves and to go get something done. So if that means I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm going into in-room dining and helping deliver, a special amenity, okay, let's do it. Let's get it done. So I think that's really, the more versatile and the more adaptable a concierge proves to be, will just underline their relevance and their importance.
Yeah, and also I think it's for the concierge, it's quite important to understand their role, that they're not sitting behind a desk in the corner of the lobby, but actually are very proactive, because there is a threat also in the industry that certain hotels, general managers think, well, that's a cost center. I'm not sure if it's worthwhile to keep them, but I think it's also up to the concierges to step up the game themselves, to be very proactive in the lobby, and also to do whatever they can to make them worthwhile in that hotel.
100% agree. 100%.
Yeah. Well,
our industry unfortunately tries to put this one-size-fits-all model instead of learning that consumer dictates how they want to interact with the businesses. Some people would be very comfortable with digital interactions, whereas the other want to see people.
Yeah.
And it's not that you take one over the other, but easier said than done, because at the end of the day, there are lots of different moving parts in the hotels.
Mm-hmm. This is true.
Very good.
Anything else, Sam?
No, I think we could wrap up with some final stories, if anyone wants to share sort of a feel-good story here to sweeten up the broadcast.
So let's start with Jessica, if you don't mind, Jessica. We always end our session hopefully with a high note. So tell us some feel-good story, something that you might have learned about yourself, or something that you observed in the industry.
I feel really excited actually for the future of business in general, because I think everyone's been forced to take a step back and actually communicate with each other. And it's been really exciting, and it's been really nice to have these different conversations with industry leaders and planners who are saying, yeah, I want to hear about your ideas, and let's see what we can do, and they can listen to their consumers. I was actually speaking with somebody last week who runs a very big conference out of Las Vegas, and she was talking about the virtual side, as we mentioned before, and she said that there was someone she'd been talking to who had a disability, and they were not normally able to go to these events, and they were so excited because they said, I get to be a part of something now. And I think that's forcing us to look at the people who maybe haven't fit the mainstream way of doing things, and I hope that we're moving towards an event world that's more inclusive.
Thank you for that. And Rex, if you don't mind, I'm going to come to you next. Anything personal that you can share, or anything that you might have noticed?
Well, I've been extremely impressed at the institution where I teach at how quickly and how effectively and how efficiently everyone has adapted. Because we were hit by a freight train, as was everyone else, and literally had to change our entire delivery model on the fly. So it was really impressive. And one of the more impressive things about it was how much everyone was helping everyone else. So it was really inspiring, really inspiring.
Superb. And Sarah, we look forward to not only lots of great things in the digital world from you, but anything that you can share here.
Yeah, well, I think, just echoing in on, the sentiments that both Jessica and Rex have said. I mean, this has been a really, I mean, granted, as Rex said, a freight train has hit us all, but in all of us, in essence, forced to sort of pause in one way or another. Just seeing people, how everybody's regrouped, and so all too often I refer to it's like it's this giant machine that's going, and it takes so much to operate the machine that it's sometimes hard to take a little step to the side to review it and review best practices and how we can move forward. And I think that with this breathing room, in essence, that we have been given, people are able to do that. And I actually am very excited moving forward in that I think that we are going to see a lot of changes, and a lot of changes for the better. And from both the consumer side and then also, from the hotelier and service providing side. So I think it's just really sort of been the sentiment and how people have come together online as well too, because that's where we're talking. Everybody's talking there from shows like this to other shows, and consumers are interested as well, which is great. The dialogue is happening, and I think in a healthy dialogue, that's always where success and progress is going to come from.
Fantastic. On that note, thank you, Rex. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, Sarah. And also thanks to all of our viewers that have joined us on different platforms. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. We look forward to bringing you many more dialogues like this that are engaging, that we can all learn from. Thanks for joining us. Over to you, Sam.
Well, thank you very much, Abid, and also from my side, also thank you very much for joining. This was a lot of value, great discussion. I have to give a plug to Malta, and I had a discussion with a friend of mine in Malta, and they are opening up the country hopefully by July. So if you are traveling to Europe, and if you want to see a fantastic place, make it to Malta. It's one of the most beautiful islands that I know of, and considering I'm from Helsinki, which is the most northern EU country, Malta is the most southern, so I don't mind making that flight whenever I have a chance. But saying that, I just want to thank everyone who have joined us, and we are looking forward to seeing you again in our next episode.